and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Two crucial diplomatic engagements are being held within a span of 24 hours. The External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow with economic cooperation, energy and wider global development ties on the agenda. Jaishankar has praised India's resilient ties with Russia in his meeting with Putin. At the same time, National Security Advisor of India Ajit Doval is in Beijing for talks with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, with border talks in focus. The timing is also significant as both meetings come 1 month before the BRICS summit in New Delhi, expected to be attended by both Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. So is a new RIC, Russia, India, China equation taking shape after Trump? And the Tianjin outreach had already signaled a thaw in the relationship between India and China. Prime Minister Modi will be meeting Putin at the upcoming SCO meeting as well. So what does this renewed push mean for India? Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador Bashti Mukherjee. Let's hear it from you, Ambassador Mukherjee, particularly with the focus of Ajit Doval, who is currently in Beijing. He's going to be holding that all-important senior representative meeting with his counterpart, who has been appointed by China as the Chinese senior representative when it comes to border talks between both countries, Wang Yi. And if you take a look back at the very difficult ties that India and China maintained in 2020 after Galwan, there has been a thaw that was seen in 2024. We saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Xi Jinping on the sidelines and at the SCO. They are going to be meeting at the SCO again when it happens in just a week's time. BRICS summit is also going to be an occasion where Xi Jinping is expected to come to India, meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We have had resumption of direct flights. We have had resumption of exports and imports. We also have opened the Kailash Mansarovar. There has been disengagement, military disengagement from those important points in eastern Ladakh. Where do these ties and particularly these border talks in terms of the border dispute that India and China have continued to face over the past several decades aim at normalizing, final normalization of ties between both countries?
Thank you, Megha. It's great to be back on your show after a while. I want to underline that the border between India and China is the only border that China has not settled. So the next question comes, why? It has settled this border with the former Soviet Union, with Vietnam, etc. Why not with India? It has not settled this border with India because it does not want India to rise beyond the status of a sub-regional power. It is opposed to India's rise. And if India would settle its border with China, then India would be free to be able to play a much greater role that it richly deserves, as indeed China does, in the international global scenario. On the other hand, with the arrival of Trump, the Chinese have also understood that they need to come to some accommodation with India. These are two great civilizational powers, quite different from each other. But I won't go into that. We could have a separate debate on that. They need to manage their relations in such a way that they don't become a pawn, as they were when they were under colonial rule, to great power politics. At the same time, it is clear that this BRICS, which earlier I had some reservations on, is actually a very good counter to President Trump's efforts to continuously push India into a corner. There is a Quad summit that hasn't taken place. He has not confirmed when he will come, etc. But our relationship with the United States is also very, very important to us because it's not dictated by who is the American president. Otherwise, you were too young then when we had Kissinger and Nixon acting together. General Saab would tell us and when they sent the 7th fleet to the Indian Ocean to bomb Kolkata harbor. India-US relations are not confined to a president. On the other hand, India-China relations need to be managed in a way that we keep a distance, but we allow each other's drive. As they say, the elephant and the dragon cannot dance or waltz together, but the elephant and the dragon can surely coexist together. And that is the way I would look at Doval Saab's visit. He is a very old hand on such issues, and I would expect his visit to be of primary importance, given, as you rightly pointed out, that simultaneously EM, who's an expert on both Russia and China, and for that matter US relations, who is ambassador to Washington, is meeting Putin as we speak. And if the BRICS summit is a huge success, I am sure that Trump's inner circle would tell him, please don't let India move to the other side. Please do accept India's invitation and have a Quad summit. So I think these developments are very important, Megha, and they actually give hope that perhaps we would be able to, as is normal in the land of Chanakya, as is normal in the land of Chinese culture and civilization and Confucius, that these two countries manage to find an equation. And that equation should include the safety of a rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific and the safety of Taiwan. We have a Taiwanese guest here too, Megha.
I'm also being joined by Ross Feingold. Ross, if you take a look at the developments of the recent weeks, there was, some aggressive posturing by the Chinese troops in Arunachal Pradesh. Just a week or a couple of weeks later, India had once again announced the names of the 27 places in Arunachal Pradesh and named them, which was also something that was not palatable to China. This has been done by China as well in the past several times, where India has objected to it, calling Arunachal Pradesh its integral and undisputed territory. Besides that, as I was telling Ambassador Mukherjee, that things seem to be moving in a relatively better direction. Like I said, resumption of flights, direct flights. There is more investments that are coming in and going out of India and China. De-escalation, disengagement along the Indian border in Ladakh has happened. It's happened in 2024. And of course, what is going to be the significance and the optics of Prime Minister Modi's forthcoming meeting with President Xi Jinping? This will happen at the SCO summit in Kyrgyzstan. This is also expected to happen in BRICS this time around. Remember 2025 as well, it was a massive show of optics. So much so, when the Russian President, Xi Jinping, the Chinese President and the Indian Prime Minister were seen together, shaking hands and hugging and getting into a group and talking and laughing about things, and it clearly seemed as if US President Donald Trump was, for lack of a better word, having these anxiety syndrome, putting out tweets talking about how this is not correct and how I am being excluded from these powers that are meeting at the SCO summit in Tianjin in China.
Yeah, well, that's Trump's style. But you raise a number of interesting points. The earlier part of the conversation with the ambassador, you were discussing how it's important for India not to be seen or not to let China treat India as a sub-regional power. And part of the way India achieves that is by its leader attending these meetings and saying that we're going to conduct our own foreign policy. We'll meet with Putin, even when the Europeans or former US President Biden were unhappy about that, and they made that very clear. They didn't like India continuing to buy oil. from Russia, for example. And when necessary, they'll meet with Xi Jinping. And now, Prime Minister Modi could say, well, Donald Trump, you meet with Xi Jinping. So I'm also the leader of a global power, so I'm going to meet with Xi Jinping too. And then as part of those discussions, I think whether it's Trump or Prime Minister Modi or other leaders from smaller countries here here in Asia, for example, that not many people want to live in a world of tension. That's just the reality. Each country has its unique concerns as far as delivering economic growth, education, healthcare. In large parts of Asia, their priorities include improving infrastructure. And they still look at China as an important partner for that. They also know the United States can be a partner for that. And that's what countries want to focus on. So when we look at other disputes, for example, the South China Sea dispute, where the Philippines and China have had a number of incidents, and those incidents are very concerning because it could lead to a war. And if the Philippines gets into a war, then the United States is obligated to join. But the other countries in ASEAN, even ones that have sovereignty disputes in the South China Sea with China, they don't want to be confrontational about it. They want to do business with China. They see the U.S. and President Trump says it's okay to do business with China. So again, it seems that at the moment, a lot of countries, they want to move to a place where there isn't tension, where commerce can occur. Now, if commerce needs to be more regulated because there are concerns about China, whether that's data being transferred to China, which was a big issue for U.S. with regard to TikTok, and India knows that very well because they banned it, or concerns about cheap Chinese goods or electric vehicles. You do what's necessary, as far as a leader or a regulator. But clearly, the direction at the moment is we still try to do business. And I think a lot of countries like India are also, to bring the conversation back to the Russia angle and potential meetings with Putin at SCO or BRICS, it's clear that a number of countries are waiting and hoping that the Ukraine-Russia war will reach some kind of an agreement, some kind of ceasefire. And as part of that, there'll be removal of sanctions, and suddenly it'll be okay to do business with Russia. You won't get criticized by the Europeans or the Americans. And countries are positioning themselves for that outcome. And that's why we see not just Prime Minister Modi, but a number of other leaders in this part of the world, I'm referring to East and Southeast Asia, have already started to engage with Russia as well.
All right. General Dwivedi, coming to you, and there was an interesting point raised by Ross. He's mentioned specifically about the meeting that US President Donald Trump is expected to hold with his Chinese counterpart. He is scheduled to travel to Beijing in a month's time. There's also an interesting development that has taken place when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, where the USS George Washington has been moved to the Arabian Sea, which is going to replace the USS Abraham Lincoln. It already has. There have been secondary sanctions that are going to be imposed by United States of America on Iran, and it has sought support of China, but to no avail. China has completely rejected that demand of United States of America. And in wake of these huge meetings that are lined up at the SCO summit, at the BRICS summit, what can be a point of consensus, where a point of convergence of these countries, which includes China and Russia and India, of course, in building a narrative that is going to be alternative to what the US administration under Trump is trying to project?
Well, Megha, first and foremost, we are in the world which is multilateral. Grouping, the regroupings are taking place. And you mentioned that Xi Jinping visit on 24th September to US. Well, I am in New York, and this is being followed very closely, whether it turns out to be G2 grouping or whether they are able to bridge their divide. Well, all that has to be seen. But I like to focus closer home as to what's exactly happening between India, China, and both in bilateral and in multilateral forums. First and foremost, Megha, the relation between India and China are very important but very complex, both from the political, military, and economic angle. Well, having served as defense attaché in China and having commanded my division in Arunachal Pradesh, I can give you some very, close ground perspective. Firstly, these meetings are structured. Please remember, they are not just ad lib; they are structured meetings, and that is the process, because one is right, between Wang Yi, the foreign minister, and the special representative, and between Mr. Doval. Well, there is a structured meeting, the 25th meeting that is taking place between the special representative, while on the military, on the LAC, nothing much has moved forward. But yes, there are certain movement on the other fronts, like direct flights have been, their visa have been eased out. But at the same time, the LAC has got heated up, and especially in Arunachal Pradesh, the PLA's movement is a matter of concern. And please remember, while at 2024 meeting at Kazan, the new protocols about patrolling and the management of the LAC had moved forward. But there's no de-escalation. Right at the moment, about 50 to 60,000 troops on either side are facing each other. So that is one ground reality that I wish to bring forward. Secondly, you are talking about RIC, Russia, India, China. Well, this is, I think, far-fetched, because the differences between India and China are far too wide, and it's going to take a long time, because especially what happened after May 2020, when the Chinese 3 Division moved in Chishul area. Incidentally, I was the company commander there also. That we have not been able to overcome that kind of lack of trust, or I would say that President Xi Jinping actually really, I think, went the wrong way after his Mam Malappuram visit on October 11,
Yeah.
2019. It appeared that everything moving in same direction. But now, what is happening is my three quick points. First and foremost, the thought that has taken place in 2024 at Kazan, I think this process is moving forward, but it has to be very calibrated. At the same time, as far as the LAC is concerned, there is no de-escalation. Both the sides are on very high alert. And thirdly, when you take a multilateral or the groupings of BRICS or SCO, they are structured meetings. There are a lot of differences, yet there are convergences. But all I can say is that there's a need for new breaking of ground as far India and China are concerned. But at the same time, we have to ensure that our relation with America and Russia are strong enough so that we can use that as leverage, may it be Quad or may it be
Okay.
bilateral relation between the two superpowers, that is between US and Russia. So I'll close at that with
Okay.
one final caution, that India-China relations are very complex. It's going to take long time before they stabilize, but right now we are looking at peace and tranquility on the borders and possible de-escalation in time to come. Mega.
Patikar Plan is also on the telecast with me. Patikar, let's hear it from you with regards to how the China-India relationship, particularly after 2020, has evolved. And do you think it is external factors on which the association between both countries, the diplomatic ties between both countries are hugely dependent on?
Well, I think it's always important to have conversations, just as we have these beautiful discussions in NewsX. Similarly, I think it's very important, even if we keep aside everything, it's important for heads of states to meet. That's one. Secondly, yes, there are. See, if you were to define the Indo-China relationship, it's very similar to Indo-American relationship. Though I'm not going to put both in the same bracket. There are many areas of convergence, there are many areas of divergence, and there are many areas of status quo. So there is nothing called absolute friendship. Realistic foreign policy would mean that we go ahead in areas of convergence. For example, China and India agrees that there has to be a fundamental change in the way the multilateral institutions work. We are against unilateral sanctions. And if you look at what is going to happen in this year's BRICS summit, most probably countries would interconnect the fast payment systems of each country. For example, India's UPI might get connected to the one of Brazil and Russia. If that happens, that's a great leap forward. Central bank digital currencies might get connected again. When it comes to areas of divergence, China and India have huge areas. For example, we do not agree to what they are doing with Pakistan, the kind of arming they do. We do not agree to salami slicing. We do not agree to the kind of dumping that they do with goods, and therefore it's very difficult to have a trade pact with the Chinese. We don't like the way that there's a hegemonic approach. And yes, when it comes to areas of status quo, it is a reality that the border has not been sorted out. So you would see fringe frictions from time to time, but it will not be allowed to be mainstreamed in the form of a major violence or major war. This is my understanding. So what has happened is that you see disengagement, you see de-escalation, but you don't see demobilization. The armed forces, the are still there in forward deployments. They are on war footing. So what has happened? Where has it led to a thaw? Number one, I think when the Galwan issue happened, the Chinese had presumed that now India would get into the American lap and work against China. And the Americans and the West perhaps also were very happy that now the Indians will act as a pivot to counterbalance China. But that is not something India did. India went ahead with its challenges with China on its own, kept it at a bilateral level. When it comes to major pressures from the West, India did not bow to that. India maintained its strategic autonomy. So you'd see a slight, and there were admiration from China on that area as well. However, what has fundamentally altered the Chinese aspect is this: they cannot do what they cannot do in Galwan or Indo-China border, what they have done with many other countries. It is a reality. China has a major formidable army. However, India has made it very clear that we have the capacity to choke you in Malacca Strait or go into your strategic areas because we have the missiles as well. So it is better we go ahead together, go ahead in areas of convergence at least. Number three, I think the way India has gone ahead developing its own military industrial complex, arming Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia with BrahMos kind of weapons, that is a fundamental change, that it is no more a one-way gate where China will keep on arming Pakistan to contain India. India can do the same wherever needed. So I think you would see gradually a thaw coming. Does it mean that there are no tensions? Yes, there are major tensions. Does it mean that tomorrow RIC will come together and there's a new pact? Very unlikely to happen. But it is very clear that I think at least the messaging that Indians are giving, and I think Ambassador Mukherjee also mentioned that both of these countries are 10,000, 15,000-year-old civilizations. There are no reasons for these countries to fight with each other. But there is a trust deficit that is also a reality, and the trust deficit primarily comes from the Chinese and their actions. So for the timing, what is happening is that on certain issues, the differences are being kept aside. In areas of convergence, they're going ahead and testing waters. And I think visits like this will not solve all the problems. It is definitely not going to solve. But visit like this, in case of the visits by the Indian top leadership in China and vice versa, as and when it would happen in BRICS, it would at least help in cooling down the situation a bit or creating a thaw, because that is important. So I think today you have a fluidity in geopolitics. There are no permanent, friends. You have permanent enemies, but you don't have permanent friends. So you are testing grounds. You are actually hedging your relationships, leveraging more by ensuring that you maintain your strategic autonomy, and you keep as a working and a functional relationship with everyone, whether it is Americans or the Chinese and anyone else. That functionality is very important.
Okay. Ambassador Mukherjee, quickly your response from you. What can be expected of the meetings that happen on the sidelines between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping? Will this further fortify the resolve that both countries have taken to put their differences aside, if only for the time being, and work in a cohesive fashion?
Definitely, and I would agree with what Pathivrit also said about two very ancient civilizations. We can't change our history and our geography, is what my former External Affairs Minister, Jaswant Singh Ji, God bless him, always told me. If you can't change your history and geography, you have to learn to coexist. And this is one way of coexisting, which actually is what General Saab also said. So what I am saying, Megha, is that yes, a visit of Xi Jinping here is of major importance, along with Putin. It actually puts India back in the centrality of geopolitics, which the Pakistanis have tried to hijack through that ridiculous field marshal running here and there to get ceasefires, which never work. This is something solid. This is Putin and Xi Jinping coming to Delhi, which will be followed, I'm sure, by a Quad summit with Trump attending. Under those circumstances, we have established, without making a fool of ourselves, the centrality of India in geopolitics, and we have made the Chinese also accept it in a way, because China in a way has backed off from its earlier position of total confrontation and have accepted a accommodative approach. I'm not going to say, Megha, that I should thank Trump for it. I am not going to do that right now. But if it actually happens, I'll be happy in a future channel discussion, maybe 6 months from now, to acknowledge, okay, Trump did help India to make the Chinese understand that they have to accommodate India.
Yeah.
Because the signs are good. If you've seen what the American ambassador has been doing, which we've discussed on your channel, the signs are positive. So let's hope for the best, and let's hope, my dear, that we have better times and we have more positive discussions than all the very, very, I won't call them painful, but difficult discussions we've been having here because of the kind of circumstances that we've had to face. And I'd like to thank you, Megha, for anchoring this great session. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mukherjee, and all my other panelists who've joined me today and had a conversation on this very important subject that is going to lay down foundation of the future of the India-China relationship. I'll take a short break. Thanks for watching NewsX.